Welcome back to For the Record. President Trump has scaled back on tariffs on items like beef, coffee, and bananas as his administration is facing mounting pressure to address affordability. But is it too late for Wisconsin's farmers? We sat down with the Director of National Affairs with the Wisconsin Farmers Bureau to see how the president's reciprocal tariffs are playing out in America's dairyland. What have been the most impactful, good or bad, tariffs on Wisconsin farmers?
Yeah, so tariffs affect Wisconsin farmers in many different ways. So it's one of those things where it affects our inputs, which are fertilizers, raw materials for our tractors. And so that affects, not only the farmer, but up and down the supply chain. So we're looking at the big red tractors that you see, Case IH. Those, we have to have materials for those farms. And if those are more expensive, farmers are putting off those purchases until later time, which affects Case IH, obviously. It also affects our local cooperatives who sell the fertilizer that comes from Canada and the seed growers as well. So it's up and down the supply chain and how it affects farmers.
And you talked a little bit about imports and getting the things you need to make everything run, but what about on the export side of things?
Yeah, that's where we start to see the prices have dropped. So you saw soybeans, which got a lot of attention. That really squeezed, when the prices went down, it squeezed our margins on soybean farmers and crop farmers altogether to where we were looking at negative margins on acres that we planted. We were looking at negative returns on those. And so we had some relief when there was an announcement of a trade agreement between the U.S. and China. And that brought prices back up on soybeans to what we saw earlier in the year. But even that agreement, there's nothing that's been really solidified. And even China's, hasn't confirmed what those purchases will be. And those purchases are, they're talking about 8 million metric tons in the last 2 months, and then 25 million metric tons over the next 3 years, which brings us up higher, but not really even to the average over the last 5 years.
So it sounds like we're talking a lot about uncertainty. What are things that you're hearing from the farmers who are feeling the impacts of this right now?
When we don't have that certainty, it's hard to make those planting decisions, and it becomes a lot more difficult in what acres we're going to plant and what commodities we're going to plant with.
So is that uncertainty really what you're hearing from folks right now?
Yeah, it's really what drives and keeps Wisconsin farmers up at night. That and the immigration policy, but tariffs are really driving what the core issue of what's hurting the Wisconsin ag economy. And without the Wisconsin ag economy, it's really the heart of Wisconsin. It's what drives Wisconsin's economy overall. And if we don't have farmers, we don't have food. If we don't have food, we can't defend ourselves as a nation.
So I want to move now to consumers too, because we're talking up and down the supply chain. But I wanted to talk too, because according to an August Yale University Budget Lab report, consumers face an overall average effective tariff rate of 18.6%. That's the highest since 1933. Let's contextualize this for people. What is the effect on consumers?
So nationwide, you're going to see a Thanksgiving dinner that's going to be a little bit more expensive. In Wisconsin, we've seen that price go down a little bit, but that's because we can source a lot of Wisconsin's ingredients for the Thanksgiving dinner here in the state. So I would encourage you, when you're shopping at the grocery center, look for Wisconsin-sourced products.
And so I want to talk to you because the president has said that these tariffs will return manufacturing back to the states. Is that a price worth paying for Wisconsin farmers?
It's a long-term goal. And right now we're going through the brunt of the short-term pain. We're supportive of the president's position and his long-term goals. We just hope that Wisconsin farmers aren't caught in the crosshairs of what is becoming a prolonged tariff and trade war.
Are Wisconsin farmers caught in the crosshair right now?
Yeah, you're starting to see that burden being pushed down onto the Wisconsin farmers. And I talked about how that affects not only the farmer, but up and down the supply chain.
And what do you see if this continues on for even longer, the long-term effects of a tariff policy like this?
Yeah, you're going to start to see Wisconsin farms continue to consolidate, and maybe that rate continues or grows. And it's what we had thought that for a long time, even the cattle industry, we talked about tariffs on the crop industry, but the cattle industry lately has been keeping a lot of dairy farms in business. The president makes an announcement that he's going to import more beef, and you see cattle prices dip down. That affects farmers in a real way, and that is really where that source of these announcements are great, but we need to have some kind of certainty moving forward.
And so do you think that that certainty is anywhere in the future right now, or is it still very up in the air?
It's still very up in the air. We have announcements that are coming in, and we appreciate those announcements. We appreciate the administration continuing to work on those agreements, and we support that. But we really need to see some firming and some certainty from those agreements coming very soon.
And I want to kind of go back to that soybean deal, because that was a really big deal. I mean, people were thinking that that could provide some of that certainty. You're saying that there's still things in the works there that aren't necessarily smoothing everything over.
Yeah, because of the agreement hasn't been confirmed by China. So we really need to see some kind of something written down on paper, or them putting out some kind of statement that, yes, we've agreed to these. That'll shore up the prices in the market in futures moving forward. We also appreciate the agreement moving forward, but it's not to the level that we really need. 25 million metric tons, like I said, doesn't even reach the average over the last 5 years. And so while we appreciate the agreement, we still need more. And where before this trade war started with China, they were buying 60% of our soybeans. Now they're less than half. And so it's even with the agreement, it's still only half. So it's appreciated, but we still need more.
And we're talking a lot about soybeans here, but are there any other specific products that we're seeing any kind of relief on right now?
Well, the farm economy is in a bad spot right now. We have milk prices that are okay. They're not great, but like I said, the cattle market is kind of keeping the dairy farms in business right now. We're hoping that there is a review coming up for the USMCA agreement. We're hoping that that review produces some better results when it comes to dairy and working with Canada. Right now they have high tariffs on protecting their own domestic supply, and we're hoping that we can lift those tariffs a little bit so that Wisconsin farmers can have a better arrangement with exports with them.
And next on For the Record, we sit down with the newest candidate in the race to fill Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Susan Crawford's seat on the Dane County Circuit Court.